have any internet issues at all today, any freezing or weird positions, we will get that fixed. So stand by and we will be back to the program. If there's anything major that happens, we will give you instructions and we'll follow that with some new next steps. Well, on today's episode, our special guest is Ann Lee Hussey. It is such an honor to have you with us today, Ann Lee. You are so inspiring, and I'm so excited that everybody gets to hear from you shortly. So thank you again for being with us today. We will have a Q&A after Ann Lee's talk, so make sure to type your questions clearly in the chat section, and please make sure to mark questions. So it's hard to cipher from all the chats. So if you mark question, like Amber said, we will try to get those questions answered in the amount of time that we have. After that, we have some important information to share about World Polio Day for our clubs. That's going to be something you don't want to miss. And then a special presentation from Region 36 End Polio Now coordinator Chuck Mason. He's going to be introducing about a 12-minute clip of Drop to Zero, which is a very powerful and inspiring movie that we're going to be showing at the end of this program. You will not want to miss that. We do have a jam-packed episode of inspiration. We do plan on ending on time. We might go over a couple of minutes, so please bear with us. But we're excited that everybody's going to stick with us to the very end. You will not want to miss everything. Well, with that, now it is my honor and privilege to introduce our fearless leader, District Governor Rick Stacy, to say a few words and to introduce our speaker. DG Rick.
Thank you, Patrick. And thanks to everyone for joining us this afternoon. You are in for a special treat indeed. A special welcome to our own International Director, Susie Howe. We appreciate you being here from the Rotary Club of Space Center in Houston. Thank you so much to my district governor classmates from zone 25 and 29. I see Farron and Tom and Steve and Chuck and Dan, and there might be some others, and appreciate you guys showing your support. To kick off our new District 5870 monthly Zoom series, we centered it directly on Rotary's commitment to once and forever eradicate worldwide a dreaded disease, End Polio Now. And there's no other person in Rotary more dedicated to this endeavor. Being a polio survivor herself, she has traveled the world tirelessly, organizing and are leading 30 national immunization days. She has shared her story and passion hundreds of times at numerous zone institutes, district conferences, PETS, foundation events, and even several international conferences. This truly special Rotarian has put a face on the subject of polio eradication, winning hearts and minds and raising hundreds of thousands of dollars in the process. Not too bad a feat. Her awards for her tireless work are numerous. Her accolades from thankful beneficiaries and organizations from around the world are innumerable. Ladies and gentlemen, without delay, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you a true Rotary legend and hero from the Rotary Club of Portland Sunrise in Maine, past District Governor Ann Lee Hussey. Ann Lee, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you for that very, very kind introduction. Wow, that was pretty moving, actually. I really appreciate all that you've had to say, and it's really nice to be with you. I recognize some of your faces. That's what happens when I start speaking so much. I get to know more of you even better. So it's good to see all of you. And I want to thank you for inviting me, Patrick. I appreciate that. And again, I want to thank all of you for being here. I think it's really important that we continue to meet during this new time that we're in. And because we all play a major role in growing Rotary, and we just don't want to lose that connection. So thank you for being here. Tonight, I want to talk to you a little bit about the uncertain time that we're living in and how it relates, for me anyway, to polio. Because we really are living in an uncertain time with COVID-19, and I do wish for all of you and your families to stay safe. The current coronavirus outbreak is reminiscent of the polio outbreaks that used to occur across North America years ago, and how soon some of us have forgotten, perhaps because so many of us were too young to recall. But the current outbreak made me think about the polio epidemics of the 30s, 40s, and 50s, when people lived in fear of the polio virus as it spread through towns and cities across our nation. Both children and adults were at risk, yes, even right where you're living now. People avoided public parks, the playgrounds, swimming pools, and theaters were closed. And anywhere that large gatherings were normally held, they were no longer having such. But those parents who could afford to, during these outbreaks, would bundle their children up and leave the cities in hopes that the more rural areas would offer them protection from the virus. Unfortunately, that didn't always work, and it actually helped to spread the polio virus to the rural regions, such as where I live in Maine. No one knew when polio would strike, who it would attack, or really how to stop it. And in reality, they didn't really know how to treat the crippling effects of polio. They learned as they went. Some families were spared, others lost family members. Many had multiple family members affected, both children and parents. I don't recall that, any of this part of it personally, but I know my parents felt the fear. And in the end, polio attacked one of their children, and that was me. During the outbreak of 1955, Boston was the center of one of the worst epidemics ever on the East Coast. Hospitals were overflowing. The sidewalks and streets were full of vehicles bringing in polio victims. Triage was taking place on the sidewalks as best they could. Doctors were seen on the sidewalks at night with flashlights, and many of these patients died. Social, or what I should say, physical distancing was a real thing, and homes were often quarantined, sometimes whole streets. It was a very challenging time. Fortunately, though, a vaccine that had already been being tested in production came out the same year, and that started to halt the polio outbreak across our country. Within a few weeks, though, of the Salk vaccine announcement in April of 1955, bad vaccine batches from a lab in California were found to have actually caused polio. The vaccine Salk had developed was good. There's nothing wrong with the vaccine, but this one lab made a critical mistake in their manufacturing. And as a result, the US government suspended polio campaigns that had been ongoing for several weeks. And because of that, in the summer of 1955, one of the hottest summers on record with temperatures over 100 in Boston, they suffered their worst polio epidemic in its history. Before the year 1955 came to a close, 28,985 children and adults in the United States would contract polio, and I was one of them. Just 3 months after the vaccine announcement, my journey with polio began at the tender age of 17 months in South Berwick, Maine, where I live today. I am the youngest of 5 children and the only child obviously affected. I spent several months in the hospital. I was initially paralyzed from the waist down. Much of the paralysis disappeared as the fever broke, but it left behind damaged nerves that resulted in weak and useless muscles. And when I returned home from the hospital, it was my mom who massaged and moved my legs every 3 hours, determined to have her baby girl walk. I owe so much to my mom, and in many ways, I am who I am today because of her. Our medical facilities have certainly improved over the years, and I, for one, am grateful for those who dedicate their lives to a medical profession. Today, I am able to walk with limitations, and although I have residual damage in both legs with daily post-polio challenges to face, I am extremely fortunate. When I contracted polio, it was a time when local papers would list the names of folks who were sick. And my illness was in the Portland, Maine paper, and the Mrs. Woodbury of Brunswick read about me. She promptly sat down and wrote a letter to my mother, and thus began a long relationship between the two, with me as the main topic. And as soon as I was old enough, I also began to write Mrs. Woodbury letters. And when arthritis crippled her hands, she would peck out her letters to me on an old typewriter. And every time I was in the hospital, I would receive a postcard daily from Mrs. Woodbury. And on every holiday, whatever the occasion, as well as on my birthday, she sent me a card. And in those cards, she always tucked $2. And that may not sound like a lot of money today, but I remember the first time I visited Mrs. Woodbury at her home. She and her husband lived simply and were not wealthy, not monetary wise, but Mrs. Woodbury was truly rich in heart. You see, Mrs. Woodbury sent me cards for 35 years until her death. She is my best example of what living in Maine is all about. She's also my best example of how people and communities everywhere pull together to offer support, even when separated by many miles. Mrs. Woodbury taught me the meaning of giving, and more importantly, the art of receiving. And unbeknownst to both of us, she helped to lay the foundation for me to join Rotary. So my message to you is never underestimate the impact that you may have on one individual's life through a simple act of kindness. You see, an ordinary life can be extraordinary, and that magic can be found in the everyday. And so now you know a couple of the reasons why I became so deeply involved with Rotary and polio eradication. And it has led me to where I am today. So we are in frightening times as the coronavirus spreads in ways reminiscent of poliomyelitis. But it's instructive for all of us to remember what it has taken to nearly eradicate polio. And it's a reminder of what we can do when we are faced with a common enemy. I'd like to share with you some comparisons between the two viruses. Obviously, both COVID-19 and polio are caused by a virus, an invisible enemy. Both are spread through silent carriers, people who are infected but showing no symptoms. Today with COVID, we weren't sure how to treat it. We've learned as we've gone along. We're doing better, but we're still learning. Same what happened with polio. They had to learn as they went. COVID-19 appears to attack mostly the respiratory system, but we now know the blood system is involved. COVID enters the lungs through airborne particles. Polio can also be transmitted via droplets from a sneeze or saliva, but primarily it's through the gastrointestinal tract in stool that contaminates food and water. And we think of polio primarily attacking children, but in our early epidemics, many adults were also affected. But today we know that polio affects primarily children 2 years old and younger. Whereas COVID-19, we thought, seemed to have an affinity for older adults, as time goes on, we see that all ages can be affected. Isolation in hospitals was common during polio outbreaks. Some polios spent years away from their families. It's somewhat similar to the isolation we see today with COVID patients. And both diseases created fear, fear of the unknown. With COVID, we still don't know all that we don't know. In both diseases, really it's not just one person. Polio had an effect on the entire family, even if all did not contract it. And COVID is a bit similar. There's anxiety and fear felt by all family members. Plus, in some cases, it's extreme loss. To me, COVID-19 appears to be more deadly than polio. There were many with bulbar polio who died, but most polio survivors had limbs that were affected, primarily lower limbs, although upper extremities and of course the spine can also be affected. And time will tell the toll that COVID will take on the survivors. Personally, I fear there will be repercussions, damage to lungs and other parts of the body. Just as polio has an after effect known as post-polio syndrome, it is expected that it will take time to learn what effects COVID will have on one's body, even after a mild infection. Healthcare workers will no doubt struggle with this disease after the worst of the crisis has passed. And then there are some who compare the ventilators of today to the iron lungs of times gone by. But we need to realize the two diseases are different, and that COVID attacks the lungs, they fill with mucus, whereas polio attacked the nervous system, which ultimately paralyzed muscles. So although at first glance you may think lungs were affected, that is not a direct effect. With polio, the diaphragm was paralyzed. It was a muscle. And the iron lung worked in place of that, forcing air into and out of the lungs. And in addition to causing paralysis, the poliovirus also disrupted brainstem control centers for swallowing, breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure. It has been shown today with COVID that too much pressure exerted on the lungs via a ventilator is not good. And as an interesting piece of trivia for you, the first ventilator was created as a result of a polio epidemic in Denmark in 1952. Both viruses spread rapidly in dense populations. People in heavily populated cities and slums are more at risk than those in remote areas. However, if the virus reaches a remote area, it will spread quickly. In both diseases, test healthcare workers to limits unseen previously, bringing out the best in all, creating heroes. And when the polio epidemics were occurring, there was no vaccine. And today, we're still waiting for the vaccine for COVID. And a reminder that there are people still living in iron lungs today, while others are on respirators for at least a good portion of their day. And the majority of survivors suffer further muscle weakness, requiring them to need wheelchairs, braces, crutches, and other mobility aids. Dr. Howard Markle, who teaches the history of medicine at the University of Michigan, says that measures that were taken in the 1950s, like containment and closing schools, offer some hope for today in fighting COVID-19. We should never lose sight that it was Rotary who first dreamed of a world without polio, and that it was our insistence and resolve that led in 1988 to the World Health Assembly adopting a resolution for the worldwide eradication of polio. It marked the launch of the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, spearheaded by national governments, CDC, Rotary International, WHO, and UNICEF. Later, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation joined us, and we are grateful for that. And most recently, Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, has become a partner. But as the first organization, Rotary remains at the center of the fight to eradicate polio. And we should all be proud of the work that we've accomplished and of Rotary's commitment to the pursuit of a polio-free world. Rotarians have contributed more than $2 billion in countless volunteer hours to the fight to end polio. And together with our partners, we immunize over 400 million children every year. And because of Rotary, I am a proud active player in the eradication efforts, and I'm helping to make history. How powerful an idea, how powerful a story, the eradication of a human disease. What is the value of participating in the largest ever private public health initiative that has gained the support of 200 nations and the powerful partners of the GPEI? That value is priceless. Our polio program has come so far, and there are still challenges yet to face. But the Global Polio Eradication Initiative will remain the standard against all future multilateral public-private partnerships. It is indeed the largest peacetime movement in history, and only the second time ever the human dedication and ingenuity has brought the scourge of a disease to the brink of extinction. In a world today, especially that's fraught with dissension and folly, our success shines and proves that we can work together across borders for the benefit of all. Our common future is at stake. Rotary's future is at stake, and we all have a role to play. So remember, the COVID-19 outbreak will create a bit of a setback in our polio program, temporarily. And no doubt we will continue to see a rise in cases when this pause in the eradication efforts are over. In fact, right now, immunization campaigns have started up again in Afghanistan and Pakistan, with a focus on protecting the population from COVID. But with big problems come big opportunities, and we just need to seize the moment. Extensive planning has been ongoing and continues during this time. Vaccination campaigns are being intensified and broad in our attempt to reach every child 5 and under, not only with polio drops, but it is for certain that some of these campaigns will be including measles and other vaccinations at certain sites. For we will no doubt see a resurgence of vaccine-preventable diseases, especially throughout Africa and parts of Southeast Asia. It is the children who once again will be affected, maybe not directly from COVID-19, but from all the other viruses lurking amongst an unvaccinated population. We've made incredible progress, and we're optimistic that we will succeed in this effort. But eradicating a disease is hard work, and getting to 0 cases requires sufficient funding, innovative strategies, perseverance, and the commitment of every single Rotary member. Your personal contributions and those from your clubs are needed now more than ever. Every club is asked to contribute a minimum of $1,500 and to create awareness in your communities of what Rotary is doing. Never forget that you and your clubs are the best public image voice for Rotary. Good stories do make our history, and it's vital that the generations of any age learn of the disease that has shaped human history for centuries. So I urge each of you to tell Rotary's story, to be the best Rotary polio advocate you can possibly be. And as the story of polio continues to be written, make sure you are a part of it. Whether it be through personal contributions, fundraising, advocacy, or telling our story, you need to be a part of our history. As a person with polio, I remain committed to our cause, and I'm asking you to stay committed with me. Every step I take is my reminder why we must eradicate polio. Every child you know, every child you see should be your reminder. As Albert Sabin, the creator of the oral polio vaccine, indicated, the true luster is to be found not in setting the goal, but in having the courage to take every step to achieve that goal. So please walk these final footsteps with me. Crossing that finish line will take continued vision, perseverance, and wisdom. And it will take the heart of many Mrs. Woodburys to be there for that final step. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And before we get into the Q&A, I love the story you told at the Zone Institute about the woman you saw dragging her feet and that dignity that you got to experience when she got. Could you share that real quick with everybody? That story, I'm still thinking of that story today.
Which one did I tell about the wheelchair? When she came to get the wheelchair? Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Well, what I want you to do is to stop and think about this woman. It's covered with the dust of the streets because she drags herself around. She comes to a wheelchair being presented to her by Rotary. And she reaches up, she grabs a hold of the handlebars, and she lifts herself onto the seat. And she reaches down and she lifts first one limp leg, and then down, and she lifts the second limp leg. And then she puts her hands on the pedals and she starts to pedal. And for the first time, she is mobile, she's off the ground, and her dignity is restored.
That's the power of Rotary.
That's the power of Rotary.
And the wisdom that there's just so much wisdom that comes out of every word. I could just listen to you all day. Talk about I'm serious. Talk about the experiences and the dedication that you have to making sure humanity is stronger every day. And the wisdom and the courage that you share with us inspires me to be a better Rotarian. And I know everybody on this call feels the same way. And so we're going to start with first of all, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing you throughout the years and just hearing how we are really, truly this close, and it's gonna happen. And it is happening. And so we're going to begin with some Q&A.
Okay.
If everybody can go ahead and make sure that you put your questions marked clearly questions so Amber and I can moderate. But we're going to begin with District Governor Rick. He's going to have the first question. Rick?
Thank you. Ann Lee, thank you so much for those inspiring words. I was born in 1951, and I can relate to the years that you're talking about. My question is, if a Rotarian today would like to participate in a national immunization day overseas after COVID and after travel is reestablished, is that possible? What's the procedure? What's the process? How can that be done? Okay. If it can be done, and how can it be done?
It definitely can be done. But we want to wait until COVID because we want to be safe when we travel, or as safe as we possibly can be. Unfortunately, there's no one spot where all the NID teams that are being led are listed. So you sort of have to learn from word of mouth. I will tell you that the Polio Polio Plus office at Evanston, if they know of someone, they sometimes keep a list, but only if they are aware of it. I will still continue to lead teams once I feel it's safe enough and there's a vaccine that's safe. Probably to Pakistan. I've been there once and I want to go back. I will also go back to Nigeria because these countries still need to vaccinate. Just like India has been polio free for many years now, and they're still vaccinating there because of their close proximity to Pakistan. So even though they've been certified polio free, they still have to protect the newborns and all the little ones until polio is gone totally. So yes, there will be many of opportunities. And I don't know of that many other than myself that go to Africa, but if certainly, you know, if I hear somebody besides me that's going, I'll let you know. But there are a couple of people, and you feel free to share my email because, except I'm not going for a while, but I would, you know, share the names of people that I know take trips routinely to India. But Susie might also have that same list, so.
I would be honored to go anywhere
thank you very
on
much.
any of those trips. Yeah.
I would
I have a
love to,
question that
I want you to come with me.
I would love that. Let's make that happen. I would absolutely love that. I really would. I'd be honored. Something my father always wanted to do. He passed away last year, and it's something he always wanted to do. So I would love to do that in his honor as well. Amber and I speak about public image and Rotary all over the place, and we always talk about polio in the sense that we don't know it. We're in a younger generation. We didn't have polio around us, and so the question, and so we always talk about how thankful we are for all the hard work that everybody in Rotary and around in WHO and UNICEF have done so that we don't know polio. But how do you talk to generations that have no idea about polio, that live in like North America? Let's talk about the United States here. New Rotarians are like, you know, do we really have to focus on this polio? What is this? Why is this important? Why is this important to Rotary? What would you say to these people?
Well, I've spoken to many Interact clubs, to be honest with you, and they get it. You would be surprised how many of them come up to me afterwards and, you know, want to do something to raise money to help. And I think showing pictures, not only telling my story as a polio survivor, but showing photos of children of today in other countries who are dealing with polio, like the woman on the ground. I will tell you, I spoke to a young boy, maybe I told you the story. He was 8 years old at the time, and he came home from school and he said to his mom, I have to write something about a disease. So tell me, what are some diseases? His mom was a nurse. So she listed off a bunch of stuff, and then she said polio, only because she knew me. And so he said, well, what's polio? And she said, well, let's go have breakfast with this woman I know, and she'll tell you. And so I think if you just, they'll understand more than you think. But at 8 years old, I showed him photos. I talked to him about what the disease does to people, and that he was fortunate because he'd been vaccinated. And that little boy was a Paul Harris Fellow before he was 9, because he just started to raise money by having a bake sale. He got some friends, and they sold food at the during lunch times at school, did a yard sale and things like that. And so you can motivate young people. They will get it for sure. And when they hear about people who don't even have a wheelchair to get around in, but they're on the ground, it really moves them. It touches them. And so I just think we need to tell the story. Just share the story of what polio is and what Rotary is doing to help it.
I agree 100%, because when I heard you the other day, and I obviously I'm very passionate about ending polio and all that we're doing, but when I heard you talk and you painted the picture and it was relatable, it got me. I was like, I've got to help fight this. This is something that I got to put an extra emphasis on. And so thank you for that. Let me ask you a little bit, maybe it could be polio related or not, but as a Rotarian, as someone that's a Rotary leader that's been all over, someone that's really truly understands what it means to be a Rotarian, what is a moment you can share with us where you really saw on the ground, wow, if it wasn't for Rotary, the world would not be, you know, this wonderful place of transformation that we're seeing in humanity? I know there's a lot of dark stuff going on in the world, but I always say Rotary is our bubble. You know, we get to make things happen. So what's one of those moments where you said, this is why I'm a Rotarian, and this is the impact that Rotary has?
Well, I have many what I call pinch me moments. And that has happened in all of my travels, when, even in the States, when I go out to speak and they want to take me out and show me the Rotary projects they're doing in their own community. But I'm going to tell you a little story about some of the work that my teams have done, and maybe that will answer your question. So for a moment, walk with me into a rural village in Nigeria. And as we cross over a bridge, there's a sign hanging, a Rotary sign. Now this bridge crosses over what looks to be a small stream, but during the monsoon season, it's raging and it floods and it makes it really dangerous, and it cuts the village off from commerce and from healthcare, and it keeps the children from going to school. Walk a little further, you're going to see water towers standing proud with Rotary signage. And then down below them, you're going to see water wells where the clean, safe water with Rotary signage on it is there for the people and their livestock. Then I'm going to toss out a soccer ball, and all these children are going to come running around in front of a school. It's only there because of the advocacy efforts of Rotarians with the local state government. And then behind that school is a toilet block, girls and boys with the Rotary wheel. And sitting beside me is a polio survivor in a tricycle wheelchair gifted by Rotary. And she was given a microfinance loan for a pair of goats from Rotarians to help her family. None of that would have happened had not a team of Rotarians traveled at their own expense with the intent of doing so much more than just polio drops. And none of that would have happened had we not had Rotarians like all of you and all the others who are willing to give of their money to our Rotary Foundation to make the magic happen. That's my answer.
The power of Rotary. It's truly the power of Rotary. It's
the power.
I really tell everybody, always asks me, like, what is this organization you're part of, that if they don't know? And I say it's the #1 service organization on the planet, period. It is about relationships, and we get things done and we solve problems. And I'm just that I can picture that. And I look forward to being able to go there and do that kind of work even more. So thank you.
To bring it back to a local level,
yeah,
and not polio, we focus so much on big things in Rotary, and we need to make a large impact. But I really like the little things we do, and the little things add up. You know, the book you give to the dictionary to a third grader, that has an impact. I've seen it with my own eyes. And so it's the little things in Rotary. When we add them all up, never underestimate the power of that either.
I agree. One of my favorite things is a dignity bag. I love making dignity bags and just making sure they go to the right people that are in need. Thank you. Amber, do you have a question?
I want to address some of the comments that are being made, and a couple of questions, maybe more as a district to answer, that are coming up in the chat as well. But let me start with Dominica. Said she's made three trips to India on vaccination trips, and I love that. So thank you, Dominica, and thanks for sharing that with us. Lorraine from the Austin Club was asking about how to inspire Rotarians outside of local projects, and I think you guys have nailed it, painting the picture. And then Jim Henry had an excellent recommendation as well, and I just wanted to read that out. Call Dr. Kelly Barr. She's in our district. She is our district polio chair. She has an amazing presentation, and she will come to your club. She'll come to it virtually. She'll come in person and get your club members also on fire for polio. And I think that's a great recommendation there. So I think those were the ones I wanted to address in there, and we're doing great.
Can I just make a comment along with that last comment you made about the effect? Sometimes I do talks on just that the structure, the polio structure that we have in place does help with other diseases. And it's helping today with the COVID. We're using that, our surveillance, all of it is in practice to right now, real time.
So that's something I think everybody needs to know. When you're in your family circle, your community circle, and people talk about, the COVID-19, mention it's Rotary's infrastructure that was used to help eradicate polio that is being used right now by the world to make sure that we combat this disease and others like Zika, HIV, other issues around the world. That's a huge foundational thing that people should know about this incredible organization.
Absolutely.
Well, I will tell you, this has been such an honor to have you with us today, and to have the opportunity just to hear from you and to be so inspired, especially in this important month We're going to eradicate polio. We're this close, and it's because of people like you. You are truly, and I mean this, you're one of humanity's heroes, and you're a Rotary hero. And it is on behalf of everyone on this call, we are with you until the end of the fight, and that is for sure. And I look forward to taking you up. I know a lot of us will all join you on one of these trips. It would be my honor. And we look forward to keeping up with you and keeping in touch. And we hope to have you come back again some other time and talk about what's next. So
I'd be happy to do that. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, and have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you soon.
Okay. Take care, everybody. Stay
Bye.
safe.
Thanks. Now let's go to Pam and Amber. We're gonna shift focuses real quick. It's about World Polio Day. Pam and Amber have something to share for all of you clubs out there, and for people that want to know some resources. So this is important. So Pam and Amber, take it away.
I'm going to share my screen here real quick because I want to visually share this news with everybody. But Pam has been a busy little bee, like she always is, our amazing Pam Blankensee and webmaster. She has added a new page. You can find it by going to the district website, hovering over the events tab, that World Polio Day. It's also living right here on the home page, right above District Governor Rick Stacy's picture. So click on this page to go to some wonderful resources to help your club prepare for World Polio Day coming this month. We've got graphics available, flyers, logos, some inspirational videos. The one we are all about to watch together is housed right here for easy access for you to be able to go and share this with your clubs, and we encourage you to do that. Pam, did you want to mention a little bit about the social media?
Sure. Right over here on the side of that page right there, there are some sample social media messages that you can actually use for yourself. So you can come over here, click this little side button right over here for the where it says sample messages, and you can use those for yourself and use the graphics. Keep an eye on the social media for the full month, and I'll be putting out messages every week about polio, how to end it, videos that you can share on your page, and other graphics.
The other thing is Rotary International wants to know about the projects that we do in our club. So if you do a World Polio Day event, Pints for Polio, Pinot for Polio, I know there's lots of great creative projects that people are doing. Please register your event, and so that it'll be counted in Rotary International and their efforts. That's all we've got there, Patrick.
Well, that's awesome. And let's support each other. Not only, the different clubs in this district, but everybody in Rotary. Let's support each other, and let's make this the most impactful World Polio Day yet, especially here in North America. Really excited about that. And again, Pam, I just want to thank you for all you do. Thank you for all you do. You are a rock star. Well, this next segment, and please stay tuned. We've already been super inspired. I know I have. This next segment is going to make you so proud of Rotary and all that it's done so far and to come. So with that, I'm going to give it back over to District Governor Rick, who's going to introduce our next presenter. Rick?
Thank you. We have another Rotarian polio dignitary with us this afternoon. Very quiet, unassuming guy. You'll never believe how much he does for the cause of polio and all of Rotary. He's our Region 36 South End Polio Coordinator, Chuck Mason, also known as Becky Mason, District Governor's husband. Chuck?
I don't think I've ever been called a dignitary before. I appreciate that. I particularly appreciate it this year because being the governor's spouse, you're definitely the low man on the totem pole, although usually it's the low woman on the totem pole. So I feel very privileged to be the low man instead. I really appreciate getting to come and introduce video for you. Ann Lee mentioned that Rotary chose this as our world-class project back in 1988, but really Rotary's been involved in polio eradication since about 1979, and really in a big way, even back then. We've been making a big a big change in the world ever since then, and that's continuing right now. In the midst of the pandemic, you know, so often, you know, what we see around us or what we don't see, which is normal life, we forget about the good things that are happening. And one of the very good things that happened just in the last month or so was the certification that we have completely eliminated wild polio from the continent of Africa. Most people thought that would never be possible. Even a bigger accomplishment than eliminating polio in India, because Africa is so diverse and so spread out. You have so many areas that don't have access to any kind of medical standards. And of course, this is one of the real keys to what has really made the Polio Plus program so successful. We are working so hard to eliminate polio throughout the world, but we've also been involved in improving basic medical services in so many parts of the world. And as was mentioned a minute ago, this is one of the things that Rotary has really been involved in, that our money has been involved in the last year with the COVID. We are the ones that provided a lot of the funding to set up regional laboratories that have really been the ones that have been identifying outbreaks in so many of the third world countries. We were also very instrumental in setting up the logistics first to be able to get polio supplies, the vaccines to isolated areas, but those are also being used now to be able to take lab samples, things like this, in to identify where we do have outbreaks of COVID. So you have to be proud of yourself as Rotarians to be a part of this. But most of us still don't really understand how we got involved in it or just how large a part Rotary has played in polio eradication. And so it's my honor right now to personally invite past President John Germ to appear before you and introduce the video, Drop to Zero. All yours, Patrick.
Children of the world to rid our planet of the scourge of polio. We keep our promises, and the eradication of polio remains Rotary's highest priority. In order to cross the finish line, we need to remain vigilant. As Rotarians, we need to continue to educate ourselves, our fellow members, and the public on the devastating effects of this virus on children and their families.
सबसे ज्यादा दुख हुआ कि आज हमारे भी दोनों पैर होते तो हम भी कुछ दुख ज्यादातर हुआ.
I had a sore throat and a high fever. My dad took me to the doctor and they called my name and I got up and collapsed. And the doctor said she has polio.
Polio has preyed on humanity for thousands of years, moving around the world from person to person in an unbroken chain of infection. In the early 1950s, there was a particularly intense outbreak in the United States that crippled nearly 60,000 people.
It was really frightening because there was no vaccine and you never knew who was going to get polio. Everybody knew somebody who had the disease. It's been described as the AIDS of the time.
And in the past, precautions are taken to prevent gatherings of youngsters.
Parents wouldn't let their children go swimming. Movie theaters were closed. People were kept inside. Nobody knew what was happening.
What we know today is that polio is spread by contact with contaminated food, water, or human waste. When the virus multiplies in the intestines, many children will only suffer from mild flu-like symptoms. But in 1 in 200 cases, it travels to the spine, attacking nerve cells that control the muscles in the arms and legs, leaving the victim paralyzed. In the worst cases, the victim dies, unable to breathe or swallow. In 1954, at the height of the epidemic, Dr. Jonas Salk tested an injectable vaccine, which offered a first ray of hope. Approximately 5 years later, Dr. Albert Sabin developed an oral vaccine that was less expensive and easier to use. Humanity finally seemed to be gaining the upper hand.
Dr. Salk, you have said that eliminating polio is no longer a scientific problem. I take it you are correctly quoted.
Yes, Mr. Spivak. I think that it's a social and economic problem. The problem is not one of vaccine effectiveness, but one of vaccine use.
Jonas Salk was right. By 1979, 61 countries had used the 2 vaccines to eradicate polio, including the United States and Canada.
But in the rest of the world, we were still seeing 350,000 children paralyzed every year. So that was part of what contributed to the launching of the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, to ensure that every single child benefits from vaccination. No child should have polio.
We come to this hour grateful for the achievements of the past.
The drive for global eradication came from a most unlikely source. Rotary International, a group of business and professional leaders dedicated to public service, was looking for a global project to celebrate its 75th anniversary.
Smallpox had been eradicated just 1 year before, so we decided to take on polio.
It seemed like an impossible dream.
When we first approached the World Health Organization about working with us to eradicate polio, they felt that we were amateurs, we didn't know what we were talking about, that we really didn't have anything to bring to the table.
So Rotary went it alone, supplying volunteers and vaccines for mass immunization programs around the world.
We knew that there was a vaccine that could be easily administered. It could be done by non-professional individuals by just putting 2 little drops into the child's mouth.
From Brazil to El Salvador, from Indonesia to the Ivory Coast. These initial campaigns were remarkably successful.
In 1979, we did a huge vaccination program in Philippines, 6 million children, and we found it worked.
And Rotary raised money for further campaigns.
You've exceeded that goal and raised $119,186 million. We're over goal!
Now, the World Health Organization took notice.
The fact that a volunteer organization can persuade public and private people to join us in this manner, I think says a great deal for mankind that it can be done.
In 1988, the World Health Organization launched a public-private partnership called the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, officially adopting Rotary's dream.
Without Rotary International lobbying and pressuring and forcing agencies to talk to each other and governments to talk to agencies, we never would have started the Global Polio Eradication Initiative.
The United Nations Children's Fund agreed to purchase and distribute vaccines. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control would serve as the program's global virus hunters.
You know, if you look at what's made a difference in terms of the progress, often political commitment has been a factor. And Rotary has been key in terms of motivating community leadership, political leadership, to get this job done.
The World Health Organization would direct the program's strategy, and Rotary would continue to supply volunteers, raise funds, and act as the program's global advocate.
There were many skeptics the sheer magnitude of vaccinating between 250 million and 400 million children every year, it's mind-boggling. It's the largest global health initiative in history, involving more people on the planet than any other initiative.
When the program started in 1988, the goal was to eradicate polio by the year 2000. Although the program missed its original deadline, the number of infected countries dropped from 125 to 9. India saw its last case of polio in 2011. This victory was the result of millions of vaccinators, health workers, and social mobilizers working in towns and villages all across India to immunize more than 170 million children each year.
There are huge logistical challenges in getting effective vaccines to children in the highest risk and most difficult areas with a vaccine that you're keeping in a closed, cold container.
Okay, ba ne ka generator kuke tayar. Wannan vaccines ne a ci. Wani vaccine ne
The polio oral vaccine is heat sensitive. If you leave it out in the sun or you leave it in high temperatures, it becomes inactivated because it's a live virus. So it has to be kept under 8 degrees centigrade in general storage and preferably frozen.
To provide vaccines to remote areas, the polio program has built a globe-spanning network called a cold chain, which keeps the vaccine from spoiling. The cold chain begins with private sector drug companies that supply billions of doses of vaccine to UNICEF, which stockpiles, manages, and transports the vaccine to polio programs around the world.
It's very, very difficult at the best of times to be able to reach people consistently every month with a viable vaccine that you've kept at the right temperature and get to every household and reach every child, let alone in areas of civil crisis.
This has brought to the fore our need to ensure that we do not become complacent, because this is what the virus does. It surprises you.
As the global program closes in on the goal of eradicating polio, all the stakes get higher.
They'll say, we made a promise to the children of the world, and we haven't delivered yet, and we won't stop until we do. This is a story of historic progress, a story that doesn't exist without you. Our unifying effort in 3 decades of action demonstrates our commitment and endurance. And our progress thus far shows that a polio-free world is achievable. Individuals, clubs, partners, and governments share a collective vision to improve the health of every single child. We've eliminated polio in some of the most difficult places, overcoming obstacles and navigating complex issues. Our successes prove that polio will be eradicated, and while ending a global disease is not easy, as Rotary, we don't give up. We'll continue our fight until each child is protected. This isn't possible without you, so stay involved, keep pushing forward, engage your clubs and communities. Start a social media conversation and increase visibility on the importance of this global effort. Hold events and fundraisers on World Polio Day and throughout the year. Advocate to governments about the importance of supporting polio eradication. Make a contribution and invest in one of the largest health initiatives ever. Be a character in our story. Be the solution to our challenge. It's because of each and every one of you that we will make polio a disease of the past. Eradication is possible, so let's keep our promise.
That is such an inspiring and important film. Round of applause to that. Thank you all for staying here and watching that. And we encourage you to share that film as well as this entire program today with the clubs, with your clubs, and share it with other clubs that might not have been here. Said, hey, did you check this program out? It would be a good polio program for your club in the month of October. We will be putting this entire program on our district YouTube page as well as the district website under the Zoom series section. It's easy to find. And thank you, Chuck, PDG Chuck, for being here today. And thank you for all you do for Rotary. We really appreciate all you do. And this was just, the film is a gift. It really is. It tells the story. And I love the vintage images and video of what happened and everybody coming together. And they were so excited and because they were making it happen. So we can do it too. And we're going to continue to do it. So thank you. We will be having our series. So that's the end of the program, but I have a couple announcements. We'll be having the series now every first Friday of the month. So stay tuned. We have some exciting programs ahead and we look forward to announcing those soon. So again, the first Friday of every month, this will be the Zoom link that you use to get into those programs unless something happens and we have to change it again. And if that's the case, we will let you know. We're also always open to feedback and ideas for programs and speakers. So please email us if you have any of those. And on behalf of the entire team, we want to give a big thank you again to Ann Lee and Chuck for being here today. RI Director Susie, thank you for being here today. Thank you, Tabitha from Rotary. Thank you for being here today. Art, thank you for being here today. Debbie, Tom, everyone who works in the zone, thank you so much for all you do. And thank you again to our fellow Rotarians visiting us today from all over the world, but a special thank you to our District 5870 Rotary family. Thank you for being here, and you're always such a huge support. We're excited for all ahead. Some really cool stuff. So again, we hope to see you next month. Be safe, go out and serve the world, and we'll see you soon. And unmute so we can say hi to each other.